150,000 killed, 640 billion pesos in economic losses, 3.5 million people forced out of their homes. It's a war that has raged for more than 4 decades. Long before the Spaniards discovered the Philippines, sultanates existed in Mindanao. These communities refused to be governed by Spain. That didn't stop Spain from including the Sultanate of Sulu in territories ceded to the United States after losing the Spanish-American War. Muslim resistance continued under the Americans. Tensions culminated in the Battle of Buddaho in Jolo. 1,000 Moros fought American troops. 6 survived. Tausugs fought American soldiers again in Budbagsak. The fight lasted 4 days. Again, thousands were killed. These 2 battles would become 2 of the lasting symbols of the Moro Rebellion. Under the Americans, Christian Filipinos were encouraged to make Mindanao their home. At the start of U.S. colonial rule, 98% of residents in Mindanao were Muslims. The influx reduced the Muslim population to 40% by 1976. As of 2005, it's down to only 20%. The Moros became the minority in their own homeland. Under the Marcos regime, Muslim trainees were massacred in Corregidor Island, Bataan, to cover up a failed military plot to reclaim neighboring Sabah that used to be part of the Sulu Sultanate. It went down in history as the Jabida Massacre. The massacre gave birth to rebellion. It inspired university professor Nur Miswari to form the Moro National Liberation Front, or the MNLF. In 1974, fighting erupted after army troops stopped the MNLF from hoisting their flag in Jolo. A 2-day battle ensued. The center of Jolo was burned down and 20,000 died. War came to Mindanao. In 1976, Miswari and dictator Ferdinand Marcos signed the Tripoli Agreement. The deal created an autonomous region in the Moro strongholds, but only 4 provinces voted for autonomy. The peace accord failed. The gun battles resumed until the MNLF signed a peace pact with the Ramos administration in 1996. Miswari became the first governor of the autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao. But peace remained elusive. Only 5 provinces and 1 city voted to join the regional government. Miswari's reign was marred by corruption and mismanagement. His failed peace set the stage for the rise of the MNLF's breakaway group, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. The Ramos administration initiated talks with the MILF led by its founder, Salamat Hashim. Talks collapsed when former President Joseph Estrada declared all-out war against the MILF. Negotiations resumed under the Arroyo administration. The MILF agreed to drop its fight for independence in exchange for full autonomy. But talks again collapsed when the Supreme Court struck down the agreement that would create a sub-state in Muslim Mindanao. After 17 years of negotiations, the MILF finally signed a peace deal with the Aquino administration in March 2014. The deal aims to create an autonomous region that would be responsive to the needs and history of the Moros. In exchange, the MILF would decommission 10,000 to 15,000 troops and thousands of firearms. It is the biggest step towards closing Mindanao's painful history of violence. Are we willing to take the next difficult steps?
What should he learn from that?
Well, not only President Marcos, but we should all learn. From the time of President Marcos himself, you can see that there is one lesson to be learned, at least politically. That the time of President Marcos, the opposition was Aquino. And then now Aquino is the one in power. The opposition to BBL is Marcos. I hope there is nothing political in this or nothing connected with families. I am confident, however, that the wisdom of both families, Aquino and Marcos, would prevail for the sake of the Bangsamoro. Not people outside the Bangsamoro, for the sake of the Bangsamoro people, those who are residing in the area. Number 2 is that some people are saying that perhaps Senator Marcos, for instance, should correct the errors of his father with regard to the treatment of the Bangsamoro.
Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum. Welcome to Here Mindanao, a forum on why we should be talking about peace in Mindanao. I'm Zach Yuson. I'll be your MC for today. And it's a very exciting day. We've actually been planning this event for quite some time. It's been an arduous process, I can tell, for the people who have put this together. Not as arduous as the bill that is in Congress right now. Before we continue, I'd like to call on our managing editor, Glenda M. Gloria. She was the author of Under the Crescent Moon, to give us welcome remarks on behalf of Rappler.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Chief Justice Davide, Congressman Lobregat, our friends from Mindanao who all came from Mindanao, the stakeholders in the peace process. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. On behalf of Rappler and Insight Gov, we welcome you to this forum. It's an attempt to, again, put things in perspective, and we hope to achieve that. Just to recall, last Sunday we published an animation on the roots of conflict in Mindanao. It's a 4-minute video clip. It got the most number of comments on Facebook. As of counting today, it got maybe 400 comments. Some of the comments are so hostile that sometimes they made us wonder where media and our universities have failed. Let me cite some of the comments. One, Mark Agustin Yabut said, "These demonic terrorists think they're the only ones who present the Philippines. Demons like them don't want peace." Reynaldo Curla added on the Facebook thread, "What did they choose to fight rather than to be ruled, organized, educated, and governed? Why? You cannot govern people who are not willing to work. Promise." There's also another comment from Dijong del Paglinawan. He said, "The video should start from the time the dinosaurs existed. The land is for everyone from our creator, and the rest is history." Of course, there were just as many insightful comments thanking us for summarizing the history of the Moro struggle. But let us get real. The online world and the real world is filled with gems of compassion and nuggets of wisdom and understanding. That is true. But it is also littered not just with ignorance or lack of understanding or absence of empathy, but also of hate. This is the reason we at Rappler never get tired of talking about the peace process. We choose to stay with the story even if it doesn't bring screaming headlines or clickable items that drive online traffic. Our peace reporter, Angela Kasaway, has covered all the aspects of the process, from the marathon talks in Kuala Lumpur to the behind-the-scenes negotiations in the Philippines, to the sentiments on the ground, the celebration in Malacanang, and the big questions that followed after Mama Sapano. It is not a question of taking sides. It is not a question of showing bias. It's a question, in fact, of obligation. The obligation to seek the truth, to understand, to weed out the noise from the facts, that's true, to clarify what is vague, to explain what is complex, to make sense of the causes of conflict, to identify the prospects of peace, and to listen to all sides without losing perspective. Does the country need the Bangsamoro Basic Law? Why or why not? What is wrong with it? What is correct about it? Is there an alternative to a negotiated settlement of the conflict? If there is none, how do we move forward? Our partner Insight Gov also shares the same interest in providing our audience various views and takes on this issue. A political think tank, Insight Gov, is partnering with us for this forum to give the audience the opportunity to listen to all sides. We believe that forums like this would promote a good and informative discussion on alternatives to war. So, to welcome you all, we also thank our guests who came all the way from Mindanao. We are honored too by the presence of the various sectors in this peace process. And so today, let us hear the voices of sobriety and reason. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Glenda. Let's proceed to our next speaker before we go with the formalities of what this forum is about. So I'd like to call on my colleague. He's a Rappler reporter and also one of the senior editors of MOVE, Mr. Voltaire Tupas, to introduce our keynote speaker.
Magandang hapon. Ang ating keynote speaker ay nag-graduate na valedictorian mula sa Mama Sapano, particular mula sa Haji Salik Kalaing National High School, 2 months after the violent incident that happened in her village. In her moving viral speech, she said she dreams of becoming a teacher one day. Well, this afternoon, this is her first classroom. We are her first students. Let's hear it from Norumbay Uto.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Marami po akong pangarap. Nais ko pong maging guro. Nais ko pong maging magaling na guro. Hangad ko pong turuan at gabayan ng mga kabataan upang maabot nila ang kanilang mga pangarap. Nais ko pong makasama ulit ang aking ina, na ngayon ay nagtatrabaho sa ibang bansa. Nais ko pong makasama ulit ang aking pamilya sa isang tahanan. Pangarap ko pamuling masilayan ang mga batang masayang naglalaro ng walang pangamba sa kanilang komunidad. Ngunit sa amin sa Mindanao, matagal na po kaming namumuhay ng walang kasiguraduhan. maya't maya po ay nababalot ng panganib, kaguluhan, nagkakawatak-watak ang aming mga pamilya dulot ng kaguluhan. Paulit-ulit na paglikas tuwing may kaguluhan. Naalala ko po, maliit pa ako noon. Karga-karga ako ni Mama habang tumatakbo kami sa papalayo sa aming tirahan. Alos maiwan ang tsinelas niya sa pagtakbo para lamang makapunta sa pinakaligtas na lugar. Hindi ko po alam kung makikita ko pa po kami ni na Papa o kung mabubuo pa ang aming pamilya. Hindi ko naunawaan noon ang mga pangyayari. Naalala ko lang ang takot. Takot na takot po kami. Hanggang sa magkaisip na ako. Ako na mismo ang umaakay sa mga kababata kong kapatid sa paglikas. Noon ko higit na naramdaman ang pangamba at ang takot at ang lungkot. Doon ko lang naunawaan ang mga paghihirap na nadarama ng aming pamayanan. Isang umaga, nitong nakaraang Enero, habang naghahanda kami ng almusal bago pumasok sa Sunday School, bigla na lang kaming nakarinig ng malalakas na putukan. Walang atubili kaming nagtatakbo palabas ng bahay. Kasama ang mga kapatid kong 16 at 14 na taong gulang. Nasaksihan ko ang gulo paglabas ng bahay. Ang mga kapitbahay na naguhunahan sa pagtakbo, mga musmus na nagiiyakan dahil nawalay sa kanilang mga magulang. Mga gamit na nagkalat sa daan. Tumatakbo kami nang hindi namin alam kung saan ang aming patutunguhan. Tumatakbo kami kasi gusto pa naming mabuhay. Nilingon ko ang aking mga kapatid at pinsan. Napakabata pa nila. Marami pa silang pangarap. Namulat at lumaki po ako sa ganitong kalagayan. Ganito pa rin ba ang magiging buhay namin hanggang sa pagtanda? Ganito na lang ba palagi? Hindi na bago sa pandinig natin ng giyera sa Mindanao. Subalit, marahil po ay marami sa inyo ang hindi nakakaunawa sa tunay na epekto ng kaguluhang ito sa aming mga buhay. Ang mga mamamayan na hindi natatahimik, ang mga aming kabuhayan na nasasalanta. Marami po sa amin ang hindi nakakapagtapos ng pag-aaral, sanhi ng kahirapan na pinalalala ng kaguluhan. Papaano po ba naman kami unlad kung panay paglikas ang nangyayari at naiiwan ng aming mga magulang ang kabuhayan? Maraming mga kabataan ang napipilitang lisanin ang paaralan upang maging katuwang ng aming pamilya sa paghahanap buhay. Iisipin pa ba namin ang pag-aaral kung walang kasiguraduhan ng aming kaligtasan? O kung may naghihintay pa bang pag-asa, kinabukasan? Marami po sa aming kabataan ang nasasadlak sa kahirapan. Imbis na nasa eskwelahan at nag-aaral, marami po sa amin ang nagsasaka sa bukid. Maraming naghahabal-habal at namamasada ng tricycle, mga tindero at tindera. May mananamamasukan bilang kasambahay at naaakit mga ibang bayan at bansa. Sila po ay napipilitang magtrabaho sa murang edad. Dahil sa kahirapan, dala ng nagdaang putukan. Lahat kami ay nagnanais na tapusin ang pag-aaral kung may pagkakataon at kalayaang mabuhay ng tahimik kasama ang aming mga mahal sa buhay. Mahirap man po ang karamihan sa amin. Alam po namin uunan din ang aming kabuhayan kapag walang kaguluhan. Kapag maganda ang buhay, masagana ang sakahan, tataas ang kakayahan ng aming mga magulang na masustentuhan ang aming pag-aaral. hindi mangganap na sukdulang matutuldukan ang problemang kaguluhan sa Mindanao. Naniniwala ko ang BBL ang pinakamagandang oportunidad upang mabigyang daan ang mapayapang paraan ng pagbabago. Ito po ang nakikita kong solusyon para sa pag-unlad ng aking mga kababayan. Sawa na po kami sa ingay ng labanan. Hirap na kaming tumakbo. Pagod na pong umiyak ang aming mga ina. Ang giyera sa Mindanao, kailanman ay hindi ko gugustuhing maranasan ng kapwa ko Pilipino, lalo na ng kapwa ko kabataan. Naniniwala ko ang ating mga leader at ang mga naghahangad ng katahimikan at kaginawaan ng buhay ay walang ibang ninanais, kundi makita ang kabataan at susunod na salinlahi na mabuhay ng payapa, makapag-aral ng maayos, at mapaunlad ang ating bayan. Para sa ating mga mambabatas, mga opisyal na pamahalaan, at sa aking mga kapwa Pilipino, muli po, ito po ang aking pakiusap. Itigil na po natin ang giyera. Bigyan niyo po kami ng pagkakataong makapasok sa aming eskwelahan nang walang takot. Makapiling ang aming mga pamilya at mabuhay ng mapayapa. Bigyan niyo po kami ng pagkakataon na maiangat ang aming komunidad mula sa kahirapan upang makapag-ambag sa pag-unlad ng bayan. Bilang isang kabataan, naniniwala kong dapat mabigyan ng pagkakataon ng BBL at ang prosesong pangkapayapaan. Sa pagtataguyod ng pagbabago sa Bangsamoro, kailangan ng suporta ng iba't ibang sektor ng lipunan. Sino bang hindi naghahangad ng katahimikan? Sino bang ayaw mabuhay ng maunlad at payapa? Hindi ba kaming mga kabataan at ang susunod na henerasyon? Karapatan namin at karapatan nating lahat na mabuhay ng matiwasay. Ito po ang inaasam namin, mga kabataan sa Mindanao. Tulungan niyo kaming matamasa ang kaunlaran. Ipamana po ninyo sa amin ang pangmatagalang kapayapaan. Muli po, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat po, Durumbay. Thank you for your moving words. Really, I have nothing to say. I think we are all, even if we are here in Manila, her words really speak to us, to our core of why we are here. And as a teacher, I was a teacher po in Mindanao for a year. I know of the problems that students face even from grade 1 up until college. So, maraming pong salamat, Rumbay, for sharing your words with us, for sharing your experience. Sana may tupad mo yung mga pangarap mo and you will continue to inspire all of us. We will discuss after this, after her speech, we will discuss in a panel what we need to talk about today. But before that, I'd like to encourage everybody here. As you can see, we're in a very small room, and we're in Manila, very miles away from Mindanao, but we can still reach people, not just in the Philippines, but people all over the world who are concerned with the peace process in Mindanao. And you can reach them, of course, on social media, online. Of course, after this, you can always carry on the discussion. But today, please use the hashtag Here Mindanao and share on your social media accounts, through emails, in a text message. Invite people to watch and to listen to Mindanao, because this is why we are here today. So to continue on the first panel for this day's program, I'd like to call on again my colleague, Voltaire. Actually, recently wrote a story, Son of a Rebel, which won an award in the EU Peace Journalism Award, so I'm sure he's very, very happy to host this panel. Voltaire, would you please introduce the members of the panel?
Maraming salamat. Nako. Maraming salamat, Zach. Maraming salamat din sa ating mga bisita na nandito ngayon. Mainit ang pagtanggap ninyo sa amin, sa Rapper, sa Move, at saka sa Insight Gov nung bumisita kami sa Mindanao ng isang buwan. Yung iba, na-meet lang namin habang gumagawa kami ng stories. Although si Norumbay ay nakita na namin at nabasa yung kanyang talumpati sa internet. Mainit ang pagtanggap ninyo sa amin, kaya pagkakataon naman naming i-welcome kayo. Assalamualaikum. Welcome to AIM here in Makati sa ating forum. Ngayon ay panahon upang mapakinggan naman yung mga kwento mula sa Mindanao, lalo na sa mga kabataan. Ikaw, napakabata mo pa, Norumbay. Ang lalim na ng hugot mo. Kanina pa lang sa speech mo at kahit yung sa iyong viral na speech na basa namin, napaka-insightful, napaka-moving. At saka kasama rin natin si Fatima Sandigan. Siya ay isang widow from Mama Sapano. Meron siyang 3 anak. Nasawi ang kanyang asawa sa labanan sa Mama Sapano noong January. At ang aking na-interview sa story ko sa Son of a Rebel, the son of a rebel himself, si Mubarak Haji Yaya. Maraming salamat sa inyong pagdating. Simulan natin kay Norumbay muna. Yung graduation mo, balikan natin yung araw na yon. Gaano kahalaga sa yun dahil makikita mo, maririnig ng mga tao, ng mga classmates mo yung passion mo sa araw na yon. Gaano kahalaga sa iyo yung araw na yon at paano mo nagpawan yung mga nabanggit mo kanina at ikaw ay nag-excel pa rin sa iyong pag-aaral sa gitna ng iyong mga pinagdaanan?
Po sa akin bilang isang kabataan po. Siyempre naipawan ko po yung mga, kahit sa gitna po kami ng kaguluhan, na-excel ko pa rin po yung aking sarili. Sa pamagitan ng nilabanan ko po yung takot na aking nadarama. Kumbaga po nagkaroon po ko ng pag-asa na balang araw magkakaroon ng kapayapaan sa aming komunidad po. Na patuloy po kaming mangangarap sa panahon na magkakaroon ng kapayapaan.
Nung Marso, binanggit mo sa speech mo yung iyong hiling, yung wish mo. And I quote, sabi mo, sa totoo lang, naiisip ko na sana araw-araw na lang ang graduation dahil walang military operations. Anong buwan na ngayon? March, April, May, June, July. Kumusta na yung kalagayan ngayon sa Mama Sapano? Magpapasok ka na naman, ikaw ay incoming freshman sa Mindanao State University. Anong kalagayan ngayon sa inyong lugar para malaman ng ating mga kaibigan na nandito?
Then, siguro po, unti-unti na pong nanunumbalik yung pamumuhay ng mga pamamayanan po dun sa aming komunidad po.
Punta naman tayo kay Fatima. Si Fatima, nakita lang namin sa ang hirap i-pronounce, sa Mama Sapano. Naglalakad kami sa street, puro pro-BBL sa mga puno, nakalambitin yung mga signs. Hanggang makarating kami sa bahay mo, inaalagaan mo yung anak mo, yung baby, si Moraiza. Nandito ba yung picture ni Moraiza? May ipa-flash later. Kumusta na siya ngayon? Ilang buwan na siya, ilang taon na? Meron pa.
One year and 2 months po siya.
Anong bago na sa kanya? Noon, nakikita namin, naglalaro siya yung laruan niya ay bomba ng gulong doon sa kanyang trip. Anong bago na sa kanya ngayon?
Ngayon po naglalakad na po siya. Sorry po na po kayak.
Nami-miss niya kasi first time niyang mawalay sa kanyang anak. First time din niya sa Manila. We understand. Babalikan ka namin, mabalikan ka na, Fatima. Kay Mubarak muna. Si Mubarak, kumusta yung kalagayan sa Lanao? Kamakailan lang, katatapos lang ng pag-surrender ng ilang mga armas ng mga nakipaglaban noong kasagsagan ng giyera sa panahon ng dating administration ni President Estrada. Kwento mo sa ating story na sa graduation mo mismo, unlike Norombay, instead na diploma mo ang hawak-hawak mo, baril ang hawak mo sa Munay, Lanao del Norte, Marso yon, instead na nasa stage ka para kunin yung iyong diploma. Balikan natin yung araw na yon. Ano yung nasa isip mo noon? Ano yung nararamdaman mo habang nag-iipagbakbakan ka katabi ng yung ama na siyang dating vice commander ng MILF at siyang dumidepensa sa inyong kampo sa Camp Bilal sa Lanao del Norte?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Sa ating Muslim man o Christian, yung tanong mo, Brother Voltaire, is noong panahon na yan, 2000 yun na yan, autuar ni Estrada. Ang sabi mo na, yung naikwento ko sa'yo, babalik sana ako at the time, pupunta ko sa lugar namin para kumuha ng pambayad ng graduation fee. Tapos hindi ako nakabalik dahil na-declare yung gira. So, nakahawak lang ako ng baril. Pero nasa isip ko habang nasa gira, sabi ko, kailan ito matatapos para pumunta ng Iligan para makagraduate ako. So, wala na talagang katapusin yung gira kasi umabot pa ng Abu Bakar yung gira na yon sa Otoar. Sabi ko, sana matapos ito para makuha ko yung diploma ko at saka makapag-college ako. Pero nung magka-college ako, hindi naman ako nakatuloy kasi mayroon na naman 2003 na selected war ni PGME. So, ganun din ang nangyari. Sabi ko, sana matapos itong gira. So, kaya nga, itong BBL, ang nabasa ko lang doon, ito talaga yung solusyon sa conflict sa Mindanao, lalo na sa Bangsamoro areas.
Habang lumalaki ka noon sa Camp mismo, nakikita ang iyong ama na nagkikipaglaban. Naisip mo ba noon, tulad ng pananaw mo ngayon na gusto mo ng kapayapaan, naisip mo ba yon habang nagkikipaglaban? Nakita ko yung yung interview nyo sa isang channel, bata ka pa noon, yung tatay mo buhay pa noon, in-interview, hawak ng baril, dinidepensahan yung kampo, nasa likod ka. Naisip mo ba yon at that point na posible sa lifetime mo at kahit ng mga anak mo na maaring magkaroon ng kapayapaan? 11 yung anak mo, hindi natin pag-usapan yung 11 na anak mo, pero ano ang naiisip mo sa mga panahon na yon? Binata ka pa noon.
Sa all-out war na yon, sa at that time na all-out war, ang naisip ko, lalo nung dumating ang taga-ABS-CBN, sabi ko, ito siguro yung katapusan ng gera. Kasi before na dumating yung si Idlingaw, sa gabi, yung 105 Witcher, pag umaga naman, sa alas 7 ng umaga, darating yung Ubitin Bombers hanggang sa hapon. Sabi ko, ito siguro yung diin ng gira. Kasi dumating yung taga-ABS eh. Pero hindi naman yung nasa isip ko sana, hindi naman natuloy. Kinabukasan, binumba kami doon eh. Sabi ko, kailan kaya ito matatapos? So yun ang nasa isip ko, sana mawala na tong gira.
15 years after, Fatima, bagamat magkaiba kayo ng probinsya, nangyari yung January. Ang bahay ni Fatima nasa gilid lang ng river, sa Mamasapan kung saan nangyari yung putukan. Nakabalik na ba kayo sa bahay nyo, sa inyong nasaan kayo ngayon nakatira? Saan kayo nakatira
Nakatira po
ngayon?
kami sa auntie ng asawa ng asawa. May
Mula-
asawa.
Mula nung nagsimula yung paglikas ng mga taga-Mama Sapano, di pa rin kayo nakabalik.
Hindi pa po kasi wala na po kami kasama.
Maaari mo bang ikwento kung paano ka nagsusurvive? Tatlo yung anak mo, mag-isa ka. Paano mo iniraraos yung iyong pamilya sa pang-araw-araw?
Yung auntie niya lang pong bumubuhay sa amin. Hello?
Sige,
Yung
tuloy mo
auntie
lang.
niya lang pong bumubuhay sa amin. Tapos yun.
Yung nagka-birthday lang at noon ni Moraisa yung anak mo, na pinangalan mo sa iyong asawa. Ano yung pagkakaalala mo sa isa yung asawa nung before at saka ngayon, anong pagbabagong nangyari sa iyong buhay?
Marami pong nagbago kasi. Sorry. Mahirap na po kasi wala kaming kasama. Tapos yung mga anak ko, hinanap na yung tatay nila. Maniliit pa po. Sorry po nagpayo po. Tapos yung iniwan ko yung mga anak ko, may sakit yung ikalawang anak ko. Namidili pa yung bunso.
Pumunta tayo muna kay Norumbay. Ngayon lang kayo nagkakilala sa Manila. Parang close na kayo, nakita ko kayo kahapon. On a lighter note, anong mga pagbabagong nakita? Kumusta dito sa Manila? First time mo halimbawa dito. Anong naging experience mo kahapon? Siguro maaari mong ikwento yung naging experience mo dito sa Manila. Meeting yung iba pang mga advocates at saka yung paglibot nyo dito sa syudad.
Kinakabahan po ko, tapos natatakot kasi first ko.
Anong napagkwentuhan nyo ni Norumbay nung pinag-uusapan nyo yung paghahanda dito?
Kahit ano na.
Norumbay, maaari mo bang ibahagi yung naging experience mo noon, di pa pumunta ka ng Manila para sa isang advocacy na activity. Bata ka pa, mayroon ka ng ganong pananaw. Bakit sa tingin mo yung panukalang batas, limbawa ay makakatulong sa iyong mga adikain? Anong konkreto nitong maitutulong sa iyong komunidad?
Kasi kasi natural na po sa amin yung medyo may kaguluhan po. So, siyempre, pinangarap ko na po na sana magkaroon ng kapayapaan sa aming komunidad. So, siyempre sa pagtupad sa batas, sa mga batas, kagaya lang po ng BBL, na kahit ano po yung ipangalan po, basta suportado, basta po para po sa susi ng kapayapaan po, kahit ano pong paraan, susuportahan po namin. Para matulungan po yung komunidad namin, matulungan po yung mga kabataan na makapag-aral po, para maiwasan po yung pag-ibang bansa ng mga minority edad po. Ganun po.
Ikaw, Fatima, yung komunidad mo ay malakas yung pagsuporta sa panukalang batas. Anong pagkakaintindi mo doon sa pagsuportang yun? Paano yun makakatulong sa iyong barangay? Yung panukalang batas ng yung Bangsamoro Basic Law.
Ang narinig ko lang po kasi kung sakaling bibigay sila sa amin. Siguro yung sa amin
Anong
lang,
konkretong mga benefit ang nakikita nyong maitutulong sa inyong komunidad?
Ano po yung buwan na may makukuha po ang mga nanay na yung namatayan.
Yung mga widows. Si Mubarak, pag naririnig ninyo, marami kasing debating nangyayari. sa Manila, halimbawa, anong nararamdaman mo, iniisip mo pag napapanood nyo sa TV, ito yung kabilang panig, ito naman yung isang panig. Ano ang naiisip mo habang pinapakinggan nyo, naririnig nyo, napapanood nyo bilang taga Mindanao?
Ang pinausapan yun sa bibihil, minsan, nasasabi ko na kung alam lang ng mga ito ang sitwasyon ng mga affected,
Mike.
Hello? Yung pinag-uusapan, pinidibitan sa Congress o saan man, yung ayaw at saka yung hindi, nasabi ko lang, kung alam lang ng mga taong ito ang sitwasyon sa mga affected areas tulad ng Monelano del Norte, siguro ay susuportahan sila sa bisiklo na ito.
Yung isang mahirap na tanong na masagot, lalo na sa mga nakausap namin sa Mindanao, ay yung posibilidad na hindi maisulong yung panukalang batas. Ikaw personal, paano mo matatanggap yung ganong posibleng mangyari? Yung ganong kapasyahan halimbawa ng Kongreso kung hindi mapasa? May balak ka bang sundan muli yung mga yapak ng iyong ama? Mag-armas muli? Or ano pa ang sa tingin mo magiging reaksyon ng mga kabataan tulad mo sa Mindanao?
Kung sakali man dito, para sa akin, para tanggap ito kasi wala tayong choice kung di tanggapin. At kabataan naman sa Kambilal, based sa Munay, yung iba, pupunta sa commanders niya kung anong payo niya. Tapos, kasi noong breakdown ng noong mawala yung MOA-ID, before na hindi pa na yung MOA-ID, sir, hindi masyado marami yung kabataan. Pero nang mawala ng visa yung MOA-ID na yon, mas dumami yung pumunta ng gubat na kabataan. So, siguro kung hindi naman ito maikataparan nito, hindi maisabatas yung BBL, so ganun din, dadami din ng sasabak sa gira yun ng observation ko, sir.
Fatima, ikaw sa barangay mo, paano yung usapan ninyo sa inyong, pinapakinggan ko kayo habang nag-uusap sa inyong komunidad, sa paanong pamamaraan makakatulong pa yung usapang pangkapayapaan para magkaroon ng katahimikan sa inyong lugar? Ituloy lang natin.
Hindi po makapag-aral ng mabuting mga anak ko. Tapos, manual ng yung asawa ko.
Yung binabanggit mo kaninang benefits sa mga widows?
Hindi yung malagyan po ng
ng closure, yung pagtatapos yung nangyari ng hustisya. Okay. Yeah. Norumbay, sa Mama Sapa, halimbawa yung mga classmates mo ngayon, ano ang gusto nilang ipaabot sa iba pang mga tulad yung kabataan? Sa iba pang mga kabataan na hindi pa ganon naintindihan yung kalagayan doon, ano ang naririnig mong mga pananaw ng mga kabataan sa labas ng Mindanao na sa tingin mo hindi tama, na sa tingin mo dapat mabago para maintindihan, lalo na yung mga nasa social media, ikaw nasa Facebook ka, ano ang gusto mong mabagong pananaw?
Para po sa akin, yung gusto ko mong mabagong pananaw sa mga social media po, siyempre po, para po sa akin is, iwasan po yung masasakit na binabato po sa komunidad sa Mindanao po. Kasi hindi na po sila doon nakatira po. So, hindi na po nila napagdaanan po. Pero as in, ilagay po nila yung kanilang sarili sa amin. Mahirap din po na, masakit din po na marinig o malaman, pero hindi naman po yung totoo.
Bilang kabataan, huling question siguro sa atin, paano tayo makakatulong? Paano kayo in particular makakatulong sa Mindanao na magtuloy-tuloy yung efforts na magkaroon ng kapayapaan sa inyong lugar, sa inyong paraan? Ano ang ginagawa ninyo sa inyong komunidad?
Para po sa amin. Siyempre, minsan po may mga proyekto din po na nagtitipon-tipon po yung mga kabataan po, na isinusulong po nila yung iwasan yun pong kaguluhan, iwasan po yung pagdadala po ng yung mga nakakamatay ng mga materialis po, lalong-lalo na po sa paaralan. So yun po, para po sa akin, sa pananaw ko po, kahit yun po yung pag-aanas lang ng mga bawal po na pagdadala ng mga nakakamatay po ng mga kasangkapan po, para po sa akin, nakakatulong din po yun na magkaroon ng kapayapaan sa isang komunidad po.
Si Mubarak naman, nakita kitang nanonood sa mga batang, yung sa mga paslit, doon sa Munay, habang kinakanta yung national anthem noong Brigada Eskwela. Anong nasa isip mo noon habang nakikita mo yung mga soldiers on one hand, sa kabila naman ay yung mga MILF, tapos nagtutulungan doon sa school para ayusin yung mga nasira, nagbigay ng ibang medical services. Anong naglalaro sa isip mo noon habang nakikita mo yon, yung araw na yun? Minsan lang mangyari yun sa lugar ninyo.
Ang naisip ko doon, sana yung pangyayari na yun, tuloy-tuloy yun. At yung kabataan, nakikita ko ang saya-saya nila, sana hindi yun mawala. At yung AFP at saka yung taga Imailif naman, na talagang masayang tingnan sir eh. Kasi jiwin sila sa kanilang operation brigada doon. Sabi ko sana ganito na lang. Ganito na lang palagi ang situation dito sa amin.
Maaari mo bang ikwento yung mga particular na nagbago mula nung merong tigil putukan? Anong mga konkretong nakamtan ninyong mga advantages para sa kabataan, sa komunidad noong nagsimula yung tigil putukan ng 2010?
Ang nakita ko lang is yung mga membro ng MILF ay pwedeng dumaan sa highway na hindi nila nadadaanan noon. So, yun ang naobserbahan ko doon. At saka yung taga Munay naman na nag-evacuate sa ibang lugar ay bumalik ulit sa Munay para balikan yung mga ari-arian nila.
Habang pinapanood mo yung mga mas nakakatanda sa'yo na sinusuko yung mga baril noong ilang weeks lang yung nakaraan, anong naramdaman mo doon? Kasi naging bahagi ka ng labanan na yun noong 2008. Ngayon, yung mga veterano ng labanan na yun ay sinusuko na yung mga baril. Ano yung naglalaro sa iyong isipan noon?
Ang doon sa decommissioning noon, ganap ang nasa isip ko sir, sabi ko, siguro matutuloy talaga itong BBL. Kasi yung nakakatanda sa mga MILF na bakit nila sinuko yung baril nila kung wala namang katuparan yung usapang pangkapayapaan.
Ikaw naman, iba naman yung gusto mong larangan. Gusto mong maging guro, nabanggit mo kanina. Bakit ganun yung iyong passion nila na magturo sa Mama Sapan in particular, gusto mong bumalik at magturo? Bakit naging ganun yung iyong dream?
Gusto ko po makapagserbisyo, makapaglingkod po dun sa aming komunidad. Para po para sa mga susunod na henerasyon, mabago po yung kanilang pananaw sa kanilang buhay po. Gusto ko pong makatulong at gumabay sa susunod na henerasyon po sa kanilang buhay po. Na na sana po sa susunod po na maging maunlad din naman po yung aming komunidad at matupad po ang kapayapaan sa amin.
At this point, siguro maaari nating tanggapin yung ilang mga tanong sa mga audience para sa gusto pang magbigay ng pahayag or mga tanong sa ating guests. Just be gentle with our minor.
Would anyone like to ask questions? Siguro Volts, for the benefit of our foreign viewers, maybe we can briefly, I know marami na pag-usapan, but maybe you can briefly just capture what they were saying.
Can you help me articulate
Sure.
it in English? That's why I moderated this, because this is in Filipino. But in general, perhaps I can start with this panel. We met these young men and women in Mindanao while we were doing stories. I was with Insight Gov. Norumbay, of course, we met through the internet, offline, and then online. Offline, we met the two while we were covering the stories. Norumbay in particular is trying to express her aspirations as a youth, how she wants to help her community. I think you heard that from her speech, in particular through education. And Mobarak, on the other hand, thinks that there's a chance for the peace process to prosper, and he particularly supports the bill, and he's calling for everyone to give it a chance. Maybe I'm speaking in broad strokes, so you can
It's a very complex issue, so we forgive you for that summary. It's okay. Would anyone like to maybe not a question but a comment, or would like to share their experience? We have a couple of people here who have been active in the civil society movement, not just in Mindanao but throughout the Philippines. So please, this is the time to share. As you know, this is a forum. This is not a lecture series. So please use the opportunity. Maybe I can invite, yes, sir. Please introduce yourself, and maybe if you have an organization, I'll just use the Voltaire Let's Train.
Yeah. Pwede kayo magtanong ng English, kaya ko mag-translate.
A pleasant afternoon. I'm Reggie Amado Buraki. I'm soon to be a member of the Youth for Good Governance and ASEAN Youth Dialogues. Now, before I give my question, I would like to share my opinion. For us in Luzon, or in the Northern Philippines, I think we should listen furthermore to our friends and brothers and sisters to Mindanao. Because the way how I see it, since the Bangsamoro Basic Law became a topic, it seems that we are dictating on what should be their future. That is their future. So it should be us who should be listening to them, assisting them, and not saying, oh, this is the path for peace, or this is the path for prosperity. Now, it's sad to say, because it will go back on our fundamental question, what is the Filipino identity? As long as we exclude them, as long as we don't appreciate the history and culture of Bangsamoro and Mindanao, then we will never really define Filipino identity. Because Filipino identity, even during my time in grade school and high school, it seems that it's simplified in Tagalog, in Luzon, which is it should not be. So I guess the problems in Mindanao started on that, because of that isolation or not acceptance, sort of, if I will go to that extent. Now, I think my question is reserved for later, because I work in the Senate as an intern, and I could say that it is highly improbable that Bangsamoro Basic Law will be passed because of the committee report on the Committee on Constitution, and of course the Mama Sapano report. So maybe later po, Chief Justice and Congressman, please enlighten us on what can be the repercussion if BBL is not passed towards the end of this administration or if there is really an alternative solution. Now, I also want to appeal to my fellow youth that I'm like you, I'm not a legal expert. So let's us just keep our mouth shut, not add any unlawful comments or distracting comments, because this is an issue that should be discussed in a legal way, in a cultural way, not in a political way. Kasi it's easy to give your opinion, it's easy to give your point of view, but at the end of the day, are we lawyers? So for the big question of whether it's unconstitutional or constitutional, let the expert do their enlightening to us. Thank you.
Maraming salamat. Actually, magandang pakinggan natin mismo yung ating mga bisita. Dahil maraming experts kasi sa social media ngayon, di ba? Pag si Pacquiao na lumaban, lahat ay judge. Pag Miss Universe, lahat judge. Ngayon, pakinggan naman natin yung mga kabataan. Kung kayong tatanungin, regardless kung nabasa nyo hindi yung BBL, or kahit nabasa nyo, ano ang inyong pangarap? Ano ang kapayapaan para sa inyo sa Mindanao? Kung kayo ang magdidikta at kung kayo ang boboto sa Kongreso sa batas na yun, ano ang inyong vision ng kapayapaan ang nasa isip mo? Sige, Noromba, ikaw muna. Yung iba, maghanda na tayo sa ating mga sagot. Basically, that would wrap up our discussion after.
Kapayapaan po para sa akin po is, yun yung makikita mo ang isang komunidad na lalago po, uunlad yung kanilang kabuhayan po. Kung saan po makikita mo yung mga tao na walang gulo po, nagkakaisa po sila sa lahat. Sama-sama po nila inaharap ang isang problema ng isang komunidad po. Kung baga po, kung ano po yung problema kung ano po yung nagaganap na isang problema, pinagtutulungan po nila yun para solusyonan po yon. Para sa akin, kapayapaan, di mo makikita doon ang mga batang nagsisiiyakan, ang mga ama na nagdadala ng baril. Sa kapayapaan, makikita mo yung ngiti ng mga bata, nagkakatuwaan ng mga kabataan. Yun pinangarap para sa akin nung bata pa ako. Pinangarap ko yun na sana di ako makakita ng katulad ko na umiiyak sa gitna ng kaguluhan. Na sana araw-araw ko makikita o masilayan man lang ang ngiti sa mga labi ng kapwa ko kabataan at sa mga susunod na henerasyon. Pinangarap ko na sana sa susunod po, di na po yun mauulit po. Na sana po kapayapaan na lang po ang bumalot sa ating mundo po.
Salamat. Narumbay. Fatima, ikaw, kung ipapakilala mo yung mga Muslim na kabataan sa iyong salita, paano mo i-describe yung mga kabataan ngayong Muslim sa Mindanao ayon sa iyong pagkakakilala, ayon sa iyong karanasan? Kung kakausapin natin yung mga kabataan na hindi kilala pa yung mga kabataang Muslim. Okay lang. Pass muna si Mubarak muna. Ikaw, medyo malalim na yung karanasan mo. Kung ipapakilala mo yung henerasyon ninyo ngayon, pero Gen X ka, di ba? Gen X ka. Yung henerasyon mo at yung mga kabataan ngayon, ano yung makabagong Muslim na kabataan? Ano ang kanilang mga aspirations? Sino sila? Paano mo sila ipapakilala sa social media? Sa mga mamayan ngayon na nakikinig? Sa pagkakaintindi mo, batay sa iyong karanasan, kung babalikan mo yung mga karanasan mo rin, pinagdaanan mo, paano mo ipapakilala yung Muslim ngayon na kabataan? Ano ang inyong mga hangarin? Sino ang Mubarak ngayon? Yung kabataan, yung henerasyon mo. Ipakilala natin sa iba. Kung ikikwento mo sa iba.
Napakalayo talaga ang diferensya ng generation namin noon lalo na sa gira. Kasi yung mga kabataan noon, sir, takot lang makakita ng tunog ng eroplano o di kayo makakita ng sundalo, hindi po kailangan makikita ang kabataan. Talagang magtatago yan. Pero sa ngayon, sir, yung nakita natin noon na yung mga kabataan ay ginalapitan pa nga yung mga armed forces natin, Armed Forces of the Philippines. At saka yung kabataan din, nasanay pumunta ng Iligan sa coastal area ng Lanao del Norte. Noon, minsan ka lang makakita ng kabataan na galing sa Munay. Yun sa Munay lang ang experience ko, sir.
Okay. Bilang panghuli, si Fatima. Si Fatima mahiyain. Pero ito pagkakataon mo ng magsalita. Nandito yung ating dating Chief Justice, nandito si Congressman Celso Lobregat. Kung sila ang kakausapin mo, anong hiling mo sa kanila? Maging matatag ka. Kaya natin. Tutulungan kita. O sige, harapin natin silang dalawa. Nandito si Congressman Celso Lobregat. Nandito si Chief Justice Hilario Davide. Taas no tayo. Taas no. Tanungin natin or kung mahiling ka. Sige.
Sana po matuloy na yung BBL. Kasi para rin po sa amin, para maging tahimik na po. Sorry po na siya para makapag-aral na yung mga anak ko, yung mga estudyante, tuloy-tuloy na yun po yung pag-aaral at saka sana po wala ng gulo. Peaceful na po ulit. At saka wala na kaming maranasan na gera, ganun po. Maraming salamat.
Narinig natin yun, Congressman. Sila na ang susunod na panel. Maraming salamat sa inyong pakikinig. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Zach.
Salamat, Voltaire, Nurumbay, Fatima, at Mubarak. Thank you very much po. We'd like to proceed to our next panel because it seems na this panel is really, sabi nga ni Reggie, no? We're not lawyers, but they are the experts. So I'd like to invite our editor at large and someone who's written finished countless of notebooks writing about Mindanao, Ms. Marites Vito, to introduce the panel.
Good afternoon, can you hear me?
I think this is louder.
Good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to the roundtable discussion on the BBL and the path to peace. So I think people are excited about this panel. But may I say that we should not leave the lawyers alone. We should, otherwise it will be very complex and there will be, out of maybe 10 lawyers, we'll get 11 opinions. So anyway, you're not a lawyer, di ba, Congressman? That's good. But the format for this first hour, we will listen to Congressman Celso Lobregat from Zamboanga City. He has studied the BBL extensively. I think you can memorize it now. Maybe you don't sleep when you think about it. And he has formed very strong opinions. And we will listen to him for 25 minutes. And then, Chief Justice Davide, you will give a reaction, not violent, perhaps.
How many minutes?
10?
10?
Is that enough for you?
Probably 15. 10
Okay,
to 15.
10 to 15 minutes. And then we will listen to the rest of the reactors. And we will call upon them one by one. So can we start, Congressman Lobregat? Please go to the front, and we will time you properly.
Thank you very much. A very, very pleasant good afternoon. Assalamualaikum to Naraiba, to Fatima, and to Mubarak. A very pleasant good afternoon to our distinguished Chief Justice Hilario Davide. And to Glenda Gloria and Marites Tingilang. Again, good afternoon. Let me begin my presentation with a statement that I always make. I am for peace. I am not anti-peace, but we need a Bangsamoro basic law that is fair, that is just, that is feasible, and then most important, acceptable and consistent with the Constitution and existing law. The problem actually begins when you start reading, analyzing, understanding the different provisions and its implications. I will say the title says it all. The title of the bill is an act providing for the basic law for the Bangsamoro, abolishing the autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao, repealing for the Purpose Republic Act 1954, an act to strengthen and expand the Organic Act, and also repealing Republic Act 6734, which was the organic law of the arm. The sponsorship speech of Congressman Rufus Rodriguez was entitled, "Be on the Right Side of History." So I said, Chairman Rodriguez, let us see if our histories are the same. Bangsamoro. Taken separately, Bangsa is a Malay word for nation. Moro is when the Spaniards came to the Philippines, they used the word Moro to call the Muslims in the Philippines. To them, Moro had reference to the Moors from Morocco, who invaded the Iberian or Spanish peninsula in 711 AD and ruled Spain for 800 years. Taken together from a presentation by Dr. Allen Ortiz, Bangsamoro War Ortiz, which I was also present in the MAP Phoenix Forum, it says the term Bangsamoro was first used in March 1935 when 120 Lanao Datus wrote FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, asking for Bangsamoro statehood. They wanted to become the 49th state of the United States, and they did not like to be Filipino citizens. The next mention of the Bangsamoro is in the MNLF 1968 Manifesto of the Bangsamoro statehood, signaling the hostilities in Mindanao. There is no mention of the Bangsamoro in the 1976 Tripoli Agreement, nor in the law creating the arm. The term Bangsamoro only emerges again in the ill-fated and unconstitutional 2008 MOA AD. The BBL and the substitute bill. Bangsamoro in the BBL is used to describe Bangsamoro government, Article 1, Section 3, which is the purpose. It is also used to describe Bangsamoro people or identity, Article 2, Section 1, Bangsamoro people, and Bangsamoro territory, Article 3, Section 1, definition of geographical area, and the Bangsamoro geographical area. 3 of the 4 elements of a state laid down in the Montevideo Convention of 1933. For the record, and I conferred with our chairman, Rufus Rodriguez, I said, for the record, when did Christianity come to the Philippines? 1521 with Ferdinand Magellan, 1565 with Miguel Lopez de Legazpi. So therefore, before 1521 or before 1565, there was not a single Christian in what we call now as Philippines. I said, Chairman, do you agree? And he agreed. So I said, when did Islam was introduced in the country? It was in 1380 when Karim ul Makdum, supposedly the first Arab trader that reached the Sulu archipelago and who established Islam in the country. So again, before 1380, there was no single Muslim in this country. The inhabitants were Bajaus, Bagobo, Teduray, Manobo, Subanan, Yakon, Tausug, all indigenous people. You cannot even say Moro, because Moro was supposedly a Spanish nomenclature or a name given to Muslims in the Philippines. Abolishing the autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao and the repeal of 1954. To understand this and the implications, you have to go back to the 1976 Tripoli Agreement. It was the mother of all agreements with Muslims in southern Philippines, achieved at the height of war and rebellion in Mindanao. The 1976 Tripoli Agreement was achieved during the Marcos era, and it was an agreement with the participation and was recognized by the Organization of Islamic Conference. It was the establishment of autonomy in southern Philippines within the realm and sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Republic of the Philippines. And the government was to take all constitutional processes for the implementation. Fast forward, the Cory Aquino government. Cory Aquino brings back Nur Miswari from exile, and against the advice of her generals meets with Miswari in Holo, September 2, 1986. The Constitution was passed, and Article 10, Section 15 of the Constitution says there shall be created autonomous regions in Muslim Mindanao and in the Cordilleras consisting of provinces and cities, etc., within the framework of the Constitution and the national sovereignty as well as the territorial integrity of the Republic of the Philippines. Article 10, Section 19 also says the first Congress under this Constitution shall within 18 months pass the Organic Act. What was the Organic Act? 6734, an act providing for the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao. The Organic Act called for the plebiscite on November 17, 1989. However, Nur Miswari boycotted the plebiscite and claimed that Republic Act 6734 did not reflect the provisions of the Tripoli Agreement. So during the Ramos administration, President Ramos pursued and concluded the 1996 final peace agreement. It was an agreement between the Philippine government and the MNLF. The MNLF was the official representative of the Bangsamoro people as recognized by the OIC. And it says, whereas the parties affirm territorial integrity, sovereignty, and constitution, whereas the final peace agreement constitutes the full implementation of the Tripoli Agreement, and also very important to note that while peace and development programs are being implemented in SOPAD, a bill to amend 6734 shall be initiated. The bill shall contain the pertinent provisions of the final peace agreement. And the totality clause says it is the full implementation of 1976 Tripoli Agreement. This agreement supersedes and modifies all past agreements. Any conflict in the interpretation of this agreement shall be resolved in the light of the Philippine Constitution and existing law. The Moro Islamic Liberation Front is a breakaway group of the MNLF, and the Ramos administration began negotiations with the MILF in January 1997. Quoting the Philippine Star, dated September 11, 2013 by John Unson, it says, Nur Miswari, as a leader of the arm and the MNLF, said Miswari was quick to complain about the government's having started its formal talks with the MILF on January 7, 1997, less than 4 months after he and President Ramos signed the September 2, 1996 agreement. The ink of the pen used in the signing of our peace agreement to the government has not even dried yet. And here's another talk with another group. A griping Miswari said then. What are the questions raised in this forum? How does peace mean to the affected communities? How should it be pursued? Will the Bangsamoro law help Mindanao achieve peace? For the MILF, the passage of the BBL as is and without any changes is the only alternative to peace. But for the MNLF, the abolition of the arm and the repeal of 1954 is tantamount to the abrogation of the 1996 agreement. This leads us to the issue clearly stated on the December 29, 2014 letter of MILF Chairman Alhaj Murad addressed to Chairman Rodriguez. As stated in the letter, it says, as such, the MILF negotiated its peace agreement with the understanding that it was negotiating with the totality of the Philippine government or whole of government, especially since, among other reasons, the commander-in-chief powers of the president allows him to bind the whole of government, including its branches. A no-no. Who gave them that understanding? Our government has 3 independent branches: executive, legislative, and judiciary. Furthermore, in the letter, it says, due to the foregoing circumstances, we trust that Congress will pass the mutually agreed BBL draft with no changes and without diminishing, diluting, or watering down its provisions, except probably for minor changes that clearly improve it or enhances. This is in contrast to the MILF Miswari faction. A spokesman for the MILF confirmed that its founder and chairman, Nur Miswari, declared independence in Mindanao in Talipao, Sulu, on August 12, 2013, and said, we believe that the signing of the framework agreement na nagkaroon sila ng comprehensive agreement within the year, notwithstanding the fact that the final peace agreement of 1996 still exists and is valid, this for us technically is tantamount to an abrogation of the 1996 peace agreement, said Hajib Mujab Hashim in Chino Gaston's report in GMA News 24 Horas. We had a final peace agreement with the MNLF, the official representative of the Bangsamoro, since 1996. Figuratively, we had a bird on hand. Now, what do we have? 2 in the bush? What if certain provisions of the draft BBL will be amended, revised, deleted, or provisions added in the final version of the Bangsamoro Basic Law? Will the MILF agree? Or will it be a take-it-or-leave-it position wherein the MILF will say no and insist that the provisions of the FAB, the annexes and the CAB, that all agreements have to be implemented and that they will never sign an exit document until all agreements are implemented? The House of Representatives and the Senate has consistently stated that the BBL will not pass as is, and it will ensure provisions will be amended, deleted, revised to be consistent with the Constitution. Let us now talk about Constitution, constitutionality, and the laws and related issues. Quoting the executive summary of the Peace Council, the cluster on constitutionality, form, and powers of government did a very thorough review of the BBL and sifted through the positions and arguments of those who are for and against the law. In so doing, and I'm quoting, they used a lens informed of the following ideas. 1, 2, 3, and number 4 idea was the BBL is unlike any form of law as it is an organic act and contains the agreement reached for years from negotiation. And number 5, very important, it used a lens. A liberal interpretation of the Constitution is needed if its requirement for the establishment of genuine regional autonomy is to be realized. Similarly, during one of our hearings, a dean of one of the more prestigious schools was invited as a resource person in one of the congressional hearings, and he was pushing really hard for the passage of the BBL. And he said, to have this law pass legal scrutiny, you have to do some legal acrobatics. And to him, I answered, I am not a lawyer, nor an acrobat. I am a mere congressman with a sworn duty to uphold and defend the Constitution. Many proponents of the BBL justify the constitutionality on the powers granted to Bangsamoro by citing Article 10, Section 20 of the Constitution, number 9. Section 20 says, within the territorial jurisdiction subject to the provisions of the Constitution, national laws, the Organic Act of the Autonomous Region shall provide for legislative powers over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 9 is the catch-all clause. Such other matters as may be authorized by law for the promotion of the general welfare of the region. However, in the Supreme Court decision of the MOA AD, the Supreme Court said the MOA AD, moreover, would not comply with Article 10, Section 20 of the Constitution because, again, on the premise that the BJE may be regarded as an autonomous region, the MOA AD would require an amendment that would expand the above-mentioned quoted provision. The mere passage of new legislation pursuant to subparagraph number 9 of said constitutional provision would not suffice, since any new law that might vest the BJE powers found in the MOA AD must itself comply with other provisions of the Constitution. In the end, the Supreme Court ruled that the MOA AD is contrary to law and to the Constitution. Mind you, not only contrary to the Constitution, but also contrary to law. And talking about the powers to be given to the Bangsamoro, it is recalled that among the controversies and contentious provisions were those of the constitutional bodies. Originally, with firmness and conviction, the following were reflected in the chairman's working draft that was distributed to the ad hoc committee members on May 13. The following powers were taken out from other powers and all put in the reserved powers for the national government: banking, energy, national, regional elections, auditing, civil service, human rights, powers of ombudsman, land registration, all other powers. And similarly, powers that are in other other sections were also similarly amended: land legislation, human rights, auditing, civil service. All of a sudden, on May 18, we received the copy of the chairman and vice chairman's draft, which were later adopted by the committee as a reference, and there was a complete reversal and a 360-degree turn. The following were removed from the reserved powers of government: energy, national, regional elections, auditing, civil service, human rights, land registration, and most were transferred to concurrent powers for welfare. What happened? Why? Who? When? Where? I heard the chairman try to wiggle out of this quagmire, even in the chairman's sponsorship speech. And in my interpellation, I stated, simply rewording the provisions as recommended by the Peace Council will not suffice because the Constitution itself intentionally withheld some legislative powers from the autonomous government. This has been noted in the book written by Father Joaquin Bernas, and to be specific, I will quote you excerpts from the 1986 Constitutional Convention. In the discussion of Mr. Davide, Commissioner Davide, then later on Justice Davide, and later on Chairman of the Peace Council, said, Mr. President, all right, we will defer the voting. Commissioner Davide may please proceed. Mr. Davide, since we have enumerated these powers for the autonomous region, would such powers include national defense and security, foreign relations and trade, customs and tariff, quarantine, currency, monetary affairs, foreign exchange, banking, quasi-banking, external borrowing, post and communication, air and sea transport, immigration, deportation, citizenship, naturalization, and general auditing? Mr. Loniedo, who was the chairman, no, they belong to the national government. Mr. Davide, I thank Commissioner for that answer. In other words, not even the Organic Act can grant legislative powers of the matters I enumerated, meaning to say the Organic Act cannot so provide. Mr. Lonyedo, no, Madam President, it cannot. Mr. Davide, thank you very much. Mr. Lonyedo, those powers belong to the national government. They are traditionally, constitutionally, and legally by the national government. But now you have quarantine, external borrowing, air and sea transport, general auditing are not in the reserved powers of the national government. Neither is civil service and human rights. Citing Birago versus Truth Commission, the Supreme Court said, constitutional doctrines must remain steadfast no matter what may be the tides of the time. It cannot simply be made to sway and accommodate the call of the situation and much more tailor itself to the whims and caprices of government and the people who run it. MOA AD, PAB, Annex, CAB, BBL, and BBLBR. The Supreme Court has recently dismissed a petition filed by Rolando Mijares seeking to declare as unconstitutional the proposed Bangsamoro Basic Law for being premature. That I agree, because there is no law, so it is still premature. However, the Supreme Court ordered the government to comment on two separate petitions filed by Phil Consa and former Negros Oriental Representative Jacinto Paras to void the FAB and the CAB. Comparing the FAB, CAB, BBL, BLBR to MOA AD, in summary, they are very similar in terms of concept, in terms of territory, in terms of resources, and in terms of governance. Almost the same, but now more enhanced and more advanced. Why? Before, in the MOA AD, you were only talking of self-governance. Now you're already talking of self-determination. Before the MOA AD, there was no inclusion of waters in the territory. Now you have territory, the Bangsamoro waters, and the zones of joint cooperation included. Then you have less number of barangays in the core territory, but you have the 10% opt-in provision. The resources in wealth sharing are clearly spelled out in the BBL. It was not so in the MOA AD. Governance, it has the same principle, but in the MOA AD, the modalities were deferred. And in House Bill 5811, it is already in the proposed law. In the MOA AD, comprehensive agreements were still to be negotiated, to be followed by a proposed law. In the present peace negotiations, the CAB has already been signed, and the proposed law is already in Congress. So I am supposed to wrap up. But anyway, there are many unconstitutional or problematic provisions: preamble, Bangsamoro, territory, contiguous territory, power sharing, wealth sharing, constitutional bodies, public order. Wrap up. In another committee hearing with the police and military as resource persons, I received a text from former Speaker of the House, Prospero Nograles. In dismay, was helplessly watching the proceedings live on TV, and the text message read, Celso, this is Nogi. It seems so unfair that a bill certified as urgent by the President lacks staff work and research from all parties concerned and affected. They are now asking HOR or Congress to correct all the imperfections they submitted on the proposed law and make Congress look like the villain for amending what they admit is a very imperfect bill. Tayo ang magcha-chap-chap nito, so everyone will blame Congress, not them. Finally, quoting the Mama Sapano Senate report, it says, the OPAP and the peace panel, while advocating peace on a high ground as it should, are suffering from a wanton excess of optimism. Optimism that blinded them to negotiate a fair agreement with the government. The BBL, in fact, is an exemplar in this regard. While founded on a novel vision of harmony for Mindanao, indications show that there are major problem areas, including but not limited to the largas found in the high cost of appropriations and allegedly allowing them to create a sub-state. And finally, quoting the 2011-2016 development plan, it clearly states, the government therefore will invite all rebel groups to become advocates and partners in advancing the peace process for the greater good of the country and the people. The peace process shall be pursued comprehensively, however, it will not come at any price at the cost of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Republic. Yes, I am for peace, but not for appeasement at the expense of the Republic. Thank you very much, and a very, very pleasant good afternoon. And Noraiba, Fatima, and Mubarak. Last night, I was in Zamboanga. I came back just to attend this forum. And last night, I hosted our 12th Pabuka in Zamboanga City. Since 2004, I've been hosting a Pabuka for our Muslim brothers and sisters in Zamboanga. Let us tolerate each other. But I said, we in Zamboanga do more than tolerate. We respect and understand each other's culture and religion. After all, our religions, the two great religions in the world, are the same. You believe in oneness, we believe in one God. But perhaps we call him by different names. The second pillar of Islam is prayer. You pray 5 times a day. We also pray, but I think you pray more than us. And the third, of course, is Ramadan. You have Ramadan. To us, we have our Lenten season. Then you have the alms. We also give alms. And lastly, is you have the Hajj. We also have our pilgrimage. So with that, I wish, and it is my fervent hope, that we will all understand, respect, and accept each other's culture and each other's religion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Congressman Lobregat. And I think with your last statements, we can still find the way, I think, towards peace. Okay, we can discuss that later. So now may we call on former Chief Justice Hilario Davide and convener of the Citizens Peace Council, one of the original conveners of the Citizens Peace Council, to give his speech. Can you please go to the front, sir? Or you'd rather stay here? Okay.
I beg permission to stay here. You know, I'm getting old. I'm about 80. But I know that we can achieve this during my lifetime.
Sorry, sir. I have to turn on your microphone.
My good friend, Congressman Lobregat, and participants of this forum. We call Mindanao the land of promise. Many Cebuanos, including many of my relatives in Argao, Cebu, migrated to Mindanao in the 20s and 30s, and after the Second World War, believing and hoping that it is so. Yes, God made Mindanao to be so by endowing it with much rich natural resources that could feed millions and generations and make them live happily, peacefully, and prosperously. But Mindanao never enjoyed genuine peace. The struggles of our Muslim brothers for the recognition of their distinct historical identity and birthright to their ancestral homeland and their right to self-determination and for redress against the injustices and prejudices they have suffered since colonial times have resulted in a war which has lasted for many years. From its escalation in the early 70s, this war has caused the death of about 200,000 soldiers, rebels, and civilians, destroyed homes, and displaced and dislocated millions of the inhabitants, destroyed and or caused the abandonment of farms and properties, seriously affected the delivery of basic services such as education and health, spread fear, and nurtured a culture of hate and anger. Into this culture, even the unborn child and infants were already exposed to or indoctrinated. What can we expect of them when they grow up? They too would perpetuate the culture, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Above all, billions of pesos were spent by the government to fight the war and not to fight for peace. There must be an end to this kind of war. Peace must be pursued and achieved, but there can be no peace without justice. There can be no development and prosperity without justice and peace. The key to that elusive justice, peace, and development in Mindanao is the establishment of an autonomous region for our Muslim brothers. The 47 members of the 1986 Constitutional Commission, I was one of them, with two Cebuanos, Naprama and Dodo Mambong, saw that need. And so they agreed to incorporate in the Constitution the drafted provisions of the establishment of autonomous regions in Muslim Mindanao and in the Cordilleras. Specifically, these provisions are now sections 1, 15, and up to 21 of Article 10 of our present Constitution. And Section 1 reads clearly as follows: the territorial and political subdivisions of the Republic of the Philippines are the provinces, cities, municipalities, and barangays. There shall be autonomous regions in Muslim Mindanao and the Cordilleras as hereinafter provided. And the task of enacting the Organic Act was left to Congress, and priority was given to the first Congress to do so. Mention was made already by Congressman Lobregat about Section 20 that enumerates the legislative powers to be granted to the autonomous regions. And correctly he said that number 9 thereof reads, such other matters as may be authorized by law for the promotion of the general welfare of the people of the region. The first law to implement this mandate to establish the autonomous regions in Muslim Mindanao was Republic Act 6734. It was later on amended by Republic Act number 9054 to demonstrate good faith in complying with the constitutional mandate. But these laws were found wanting in many respects. They do not guarantee meaningful and genuine autonomy. The search for peace and development in Mindanao must therefore end in a law that truly gives flesh and blood to the spirit of the constitutional mandate to create an autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao. We know that for 17 years, peace negotiations were, for the first time, seriously and in good faith undertaken by the government and the MILF. Why MILF? Because, in my opinion, it is the biggest Muslim group which seeks in good faith to dialogue with the government. The final product of the negotiations is the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro, which in turn became the basis for the draft basic law for the Bangsamoro. Now, as I said during the committee meeting on the BBL by the ad hoc committee of the House of Representatives, the BBL is a cornerstone to justice, peace, and development for Mindanao, and the entire Philippines as well. For justice, peace, and development in Mindanao means justice, peace, and development as well for the entire Philippines. We are familiar with the discourse on one body with many parts in Corinthians. And even the most desirable part of that body will affect the rest if that desirable part is wasted away. So we consider the Philippines as one body, one whole, one spirit, one heart. And therefore, if you remove Mindanao away from real peace, progress, and development, it will affect the entire Philippines. Now I say that the BBL, which by the way has metamorphosed in the House of Representatives, into the basic law for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, or BLBAR, is the mustard seed which we have to sow. The mustard seed of justice, peace, and development for Mindanao. I speak of the mustard seed because we were reminded that Sunday of June 14, June 14, the homily was about, the gospel was about the mustard seed. And that mustard seed may spring, may be developed only if we are together in attending to that. And now, on the basic issue regarding the constitutionality. But I should like to make it very, very clear here that we of the Citizens Peace Council, with the original 5, expanded the same up to 32. Then at the summit on April 18, I guess, more than 136 attended. There were 4 clusters. The first cluster was on constitutionality, form and powers of government and plebiscite. The second on economy and patrimony. The third on social justice and human development. And the fourth on peace and security and human security as well. I was assigned to the first cluster. And I'm very glad that our dear Congressman Lobregat mentioned a little bit about the cluster on constitutionality. We studied very well the original BBL. And by the way, because of the substitute bill, what we must discuss right now must be the basic law on the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, not the original BBL. Against the original BBL, my cluster on constitutionality considered many aspects on constitutionality. And the end, we concluded that overwhelmingly, the original BBL was constitutional. And we only recommended some refinements or some modifications to ensure that the entire law itself would be constitutional in all respects. We analyzed it very well. And our cluster's analysis premised on interrelated groups of propositions that serve as the overarching framework for the cluster's task were the following. First, the passage of law that creates the autonomous region is a constitutional mandate. Second, the passage of an organic law for the autonomous region is compelled by the imperative of correcting the injustices of the past, the urgency of the socio-economic political context and at the present, and the uncertainty of having a similar opportunity in the future. And finally, autonomy, especially in the context of the Constitution's mandate for the creation of autonomous regions, is in itself a peculiarity, and the region that is given autonomy must be recognized and respected for its uniqueness. Then, the BBL must be understood as an extraordinary special law, not only because of its nature as an organic act, but also, and more importantly, as an embodiment of peace agreement, the product of prolonged negotiations. And finally, the Constitution must be interpreted liberally, as correctly stated by Congressman Lobregat, so as to give life to the provisions and allow the fulfillment of the decades-old mandate for genuine regional autonomy. Now, the 5 recommendations that we have, including what is supposed to be revised or modified on constitutionality, were submitted by us by way of an annex to the report itself, quite long. And in the end, we found out that about 80% of our recommendations regarding constitutionality are now embodied in the basic law for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. I know that many would continue to oppose the BBL basically on the issue of constitutionality. But I am sure that the BBL, as modified by the substitute bill known as the Basic Law for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, will not suffer any constitutional infirmity except for one. That is the opt-in provision. And I was glad to hear that about the end of the last session, no less than the speaker mentioned that the body had agreed to delete that provision on the opt-in, rugged, meaning the gradual increase of the area simply by a simple petition of a certain percentage of the voters of a given area to be attached to the Bangsamoro. But this will be after already the ratification. So my proposal would be that we must support the BBL. Not only that we should be campaigning in Mindanao, but we must campaign throughout the country to ensure that the BBL will be approved as modified, and I'm hoping that the Senate will do the same. It is not, I do not agree that the MILF would want it as is. No, I'm sure that they will. Because what will happen if they will not? There can be no substitute again. There is no more opportunity for us for peace, development, and progress. So I would urge non-Mindawanons like us here to really work hard. And I was very happy to read this morning in the Philippine Daily Inquirer that even the CBCP now would agree to a BBL, but with some comments and modifications. One, for instance, that it should really be in compliance with the Constitution, that it should promote justice, and finally, that it will grant autonomy also to the other indigenous groups in Mindanao. But that would be another matter, really. And finally, it is within the framework of the CBCP had proposed, are now practically all embodied in the basic law for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, except that area which I pointed out earlier. So I hope that anyway, Congressman Lobregat will be attending, I think, every day of the sessions in the lower house, and he can make all the proposals to ensure that indeed peace is accomplished. But remember, it is not only peace that we are seeking for. It is more on justice and development. So, and that would be for the entire Philippines. So thank you very much.
Thank you, former Chief Justice Davide. And I think Congressman Lobregat has suggested more than 100 amendments, right? Again, we can talk about that later. So we would like now to call on the panel of reactors. Can we start with Attorney Marlon Manuel, National Coordinator for Alternative Law Group? I think you can highlight your main point, and because we're giving you 5 minutes each. I know it's difficult, but please
yes, good afternoon.
Focus, meditate, focus.
Okay, maganda hapon po sa inyo lahat. I need to start by reacting to the statement earlier that we should allow the lawyers to decide the fate of the nation. I cannot accept that as a lawyer. And please believe me, let us not trust lawyers too much. We have been brought to this situation, in fact, because of the past deeds of many lawyers who are in government, in business, even in civil society, for that matter, in media. Okay, having said that, the MILF had always been mentioned in a number of discussion sessions about the comprehensive agreement of the Bangsamoro, about the BBL, and now about the draft, the BLBAR. I've always clarified that the broader perspective is to look at the proposed law not so much as a concession by the Philippine government to the MILF, a rebel group, but as a consensus of the entire Philippines. that will change the way we look at the solution. If we look at the BBL or any organic law that will be finalized later by the legislative department as a gift to a rebel movement, then it will always be seen as a compromise. It will always be seen as a surrender, as it has been seen now as a surrender of powers by the Philippine government, as a surrender of territory. On the other hand, if we look at the BBL or any organic law that will be crafted as a product of a constitutional mandate that we have all agreed to, as a fulfillment of a promise that had not been done for a very long time, then that should change our perspective on the BBL. That should allow us to participate in the crafting of the organic law, whether we are Mindanaoans or not, because this is, in the first place, not a product of a mere agreement between two peace panels. It should be a product of a consensus-building process that should be a long-delayed fulfillment of what we said we would do in 1987. Until now, we have not done it. Until now, we have delayed it. Until now, we are still in disagreement. If we look at the BBL as coming from the constitutional mandate, then we will not be using the Constitution itself to be an obstacle to the fulfillment of its own mandate. On the other hand, we will look at the BBL as an embodiment of the promise that was made in the Constitution. When we ratified it as a nation, as a united nation, coming from a dark past in 1987, then that should be a way forward for all of us. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Marlon. Now we're calling another lawyer, Benedicto Bacani, Executive Director of the Institute for Autonomy and Governance.
Thank you, Marites. My reaction is from a perspective of one that was devoted almost my entire professional life in the study of our constitutional, legal, and political system in relation to sustainable Mindanao peace and development. In translating a peace agreement, such as the Comprehensive Agreement on the Bangsamoro to a law, we are not only placing the country's constitutional, legal, and political institutions and processes in the spotlight, but we are putting it to a rigorous stress test. In this stress test, the main protagonists, as mentioned here, are lawyers and politicians who are looked at either with admiration or disdain, depending from which side of the fence you look at them. We are peace advocates, and we have our own favorite lawyers and politicians, our champions in Congress and the Senate and the bar of public opinion. On the other hand, we also profile politicians and lawyers, critical and or anti-CAB and the BBL as targets for what we call education on the peace process and the roots of the Mindanao conflict, where you will put Representative Celso in that kind of place is your own. But Representative Celso, is not a lawyer, but he'll shame all lawyers, in terms of how rigorous his research can be. So we may not admit it as much, but we are all by heart lawyers and politicians with respect to the Mindanao peace process. We know that law is what the Supreme Court says it is. Just we interpret the law that suits our own interests and advocacies. On the other hand, we easily tend to cast political motives to those who place the law and the Constitution in our perception as a roadblock to the CAB and the BBL. One concrete example, I think, is the convener of the Bishop Ulama Forum petitioning the Supreme Court against the CAB. And one of the views that I've heard is that his motive is clearly political, as he was close to the past administration of President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Yet we forget that it was under President Arroyo that we almost had the MOA AD, which is the most progressive peace agreement with the MILF. So my conclusion is, just as no one is above the law, no one is also above politics. And this brings me to my main point, that building peace in Mindanao is not only about the CAB and the BBL. It is also about honest, open, and transparent dialogue for continuing political and legal reforms. The Mama Sapano incident is tragic as it resulted in the loss of many lives. In the peace circle, Mama Sapano derailed the passage of the BBL that we badly wanted passed before election season start. Back then, it was anticipated that the BBL and MESH in the election season will be a disaster. Mama Sapano in the election season is for most of us a double whammy for the BBL. On the other hand, the peace process with the MLF has turned into a public peace process because of Mama Sapano and the elections. We are in a very, very difficult situation because in a public peace process like that of the passage of the BBL, there are so many conflicting interests that we have to address. From the two-party negotiations between the executive department and the MILF, the ball is now in the arena where personal and group interests are for most part in collision with each other. Yet we know fully well that unless there is strong political support for the BBL, it will either be rejected in the plebiscite or it will fail in implementation. We have to note that the BBL is not our first experience in translating peace agreements to a legal and enforceable legal document. The Tripoli Agreement under President Marcos was legalized by presidential decrees and executive orders of a president who had both legislative and executive powers. The final peace agreement with the MNLF was legalized after 4 years from signing. It just lapsed into law. And up to now, the MNLF claims that it has not been fully implemented. To expect that BBL under the same constitutional, legal, and political framework to be passed to the fullest satisfaction of everybody and of the MLF may be a too optimistic scenario. Let me suggest that we should be able to locate the MILF peace process in the context of our political and legal systems that must be subject of continuing development and reforms. And in the op-ed I wrote for Rappler, I said that to build and not squander the gains of the CAB and the peace process, we must shift the frame by which we now legislate the BBL from the current zero-sum positional approach. Yung parang talagang war of attrition, kung sino unang mag-blink, to an incremental interest-based strategy with a primary strategic goal to make moral autonomy work. The MILF, by participating in the peace process, has actually committed to advocate their aspirations within our political system. And our political system must be welcoming to rebels who want to continue to advocate for their ideals and for their aspirations. In this case, we must distinguish between the BBL and the CAB. And this is for Norambay and the others. Huwag kayong mag-alala. Kahit na medyo mabago yun, BBL, or hindi man siya mapasa agad. Okay, ha? Napakaraming avenues at yung sasabihin natin peace process ay mas malawak sa BBL. Mahalaga yung BBL. It's a milestone to the peace process. But that has to be located within our, sabihin natin, work for political reforms and development in our, sabihin natin, political and legal frameworks. And this framework requires acceptance by key parties of the proposition that the FAB and the CAB are aspirational as well as roadmap documents, and the political deals therein can only be meaningfully implemented in phases and in step with reforms in our political institutions, laws, and processes. Both the Bangsamoro and government and maybe the majority of Filipinos are siguristas, and that's the problem. We want to end immediately with guarantees. Okay, on the part of the MILF, the Bangsamoro, they want to guarantee, of course, the entrenchment of the peace agreement overnight. On our part also, we want to put an end to the aspiration for independence of the Bangsamoro. Please take note that we are working on both symbols and political and economic systems. You need to find the balance. You need to understand history. You need to understand aspirations. At the end of the day, the most important, I think, in the work for the BBL is that the BBL is not just a substance law, but also a process law. And that's why it is, for me, the most important there would be the provisions on intergovernmental relations, the continuing dialogue on political systems, the continuing dialogue on how to strengthen autonomy, and the mechanism for parliamentary or interparliamentary dialogue between the national and the regional governments. So on that note, I end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Attorney Bacani. Now the last one to react is Ms. Samira Gutok. She's an advocate. She's a co-convener for civil society, Friends of Peace.
Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Ramadan. I think I can already break my Ramadan later. Okay. Yeah, 6 na. First of all, to the congressman, thank you very much for the presentation. I just wanted to share about what I saw in Congress, having been there, watching you and the House of Congress. On this first note, I'd like to thank you and the Congress for authoring the BBL. You had 50 House of Representatives meetings. You had 200 hours of discussions. You had almost a year of the BBL presented since September to you last year. What I couldn't understand is why in 30 minutes or so, the attendance of 290 congressmen would be awaited by almost an hour so that the substance of what you were saying in your PowerPoint could not be discussed. The power of energy could not be discussed. The power of devolution, which is central to ARM. This is our Bible in ARM. Devolution is key, could not be discussed. You have here in the ARMM a human resource that can be beneficial to the Philippines. They could be Arabic reading and speaking, and therefore can contribute to the Arab world. They are multilingual, familiar with the Filipino language because of TV and radio, familiar with the Catholic religion because of private schools that they go to. They are very mobile. They are vendors. They sell in non-Muslim areas just to get by. So the benefit for me of a BBL is a relationship of respect and asymmetry. The key word being that Congress has the power to legislate and change things. Asymmetry should not be feared. A power that can be echoed below. A power that anyway is filed in Congress. It is not separating. You are not filing a bill in the United States of Congress as 1935 Declaration of Lanao wanting to be part of the United States, as you, Congressman, clearly stated in history. An advantage of a BBL, a proximate population, using the language, using their psyche, the worldview that these people, 4 million, understand. Sultans and datus whose laws have not been codified, whose languages have not been understood, whose laws have not been made jurisprudence. A block grant that is used for poverty financing, why fear that? Opt in to inspire the Bangsamoro to invite others, why fear that? An identity that is Bangsamoro, which finds affirmation and allows evolution, why fear that? Why fear why fear something that has not been written? Why fear something that you have the power to legislate? If Manila-based conversations like this make the BBL complex, I think it is also in these efforts of Rappler and media and legislators like you who have oversight powers, who have legislative staff work, who can pay people to be your experts and consultants. It is these efforts that can simplify things. In law school, I wrote about the Supreme Court. The role of the Supreme Court as a people's court. Allow the court to define what is controversial. Allow the court to decide what is controversial and make them decide what is law. It is not Congress's decision to stop 17 years of an output. This was my sadness and frustration as a civil society observing the technicality of Congressperson Atienza blocking discussions on the BBL on the basis of attendance, blocking discussions on Bangsamoro on the basis of having no people seating on the congressional seats. When we only have 5 congresspersons, not even many of those Bangsamoro can speak for us. The mere filing of a bill does not say it is separationist. And you have that control in government as one executive, legislative, judiciary. Do you think we, Bangsamoro, have that convenience to talk to the 3 branches of government? The power of Congress is to harmonize, to bring all the stakeholders together. You have the concept of JELAC, Joint Executive Legislative. We talk to the president as much as the oppositors. Senator Bong Marcos has also to sit down with the Congress. Don't let the politics of Binay versus whoever in this administration make this BBL suffer. So, let your oversight powers be used. As much as you asked about what happened to the MNLF, we already saw the boycott of the MNLF in that peace talks. Did the MILF boycott this? No. The BBL will not guarantee peace. Radicalization is there po. In my hometown, 300 youth are ready. And this is not a threat. This is not a threat. We live that reality, having lived there for 20 years, and I served in ARM for 1 year. The chairs of my office, the table had to be requested from the Department of Budget and Management. Where is devolution? If chairs, telephones, and paper have to be requested, a mere 5,000 pesos from national government, how do you think development can be for those 4 million Noraidas? Or valedictorians like her who can't be hired by NPC or National Steel, even if they are sourcing energy from the Lake Lanao, which is located in the Bangsamoro areas. Do not fear the words territory. Do not fear the words geography. These are English. They don't matter much in our areas. We don't have lawyers, not many progressive lawyers, to file cases in the Supreme Court. You might even have to be congressman to be the one to fight for the Bangsamoro in Metro Manila. So for this, we thank Rappler, we thank the congresspersons for being brave. Let them be peacemakers. Let them make that decision now under Aquino administration. And this is how I believe this generation or this time is critical and not a future. A future president, I think, is more fragmented than an Aquino administration. I believe this administration has more of a collective acceptability among the Bangsamoro elites, whether they be Ampatuan, whether they be Mangudadatu. I believe now, more than ever, it's more concrete and more acceptable to have already a BBL come into fruition because congresspersons like Sir Celso Lobrigat are willing to listen, as well as Senator Bong Marcos. I believe so. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Samira. Before we open the floor for discussion, there's a slight change in the program. And I think you're lucky because the next speaker, Maria Ressa, CEO and Executive Editor of Rappler, will address the issue of the repercussions of the BBL if it is not passed in the global context. You can either sit there or go to the front. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, and I'm so sorry that I was late. We just interviewed Chief Justice Sereno, and actually, of course, I asked her about the BBL, but of course, she didn't say anything about what would happen. You've heard from the people affected, the micro, we call it in storytelling. Our macro right now is here in the dispute of the details of the law, but I will talk to you not about the Philippines, but about the impact of everything else that is going on outside the Philippines. Let me throw here about everything that's going on outside. And I also speak to you not as a Rappler editor, but as somebody who has followed both the peace process. I was there in Jakarta in 1995. I've followed nearly every kidnapping, every single violent outbreak in Southeast Asia, a decade of that in Indonesia, and I've actually seen more of it in Indonesia than I have in the Philippines. So this is, let me just go this way. Let's just pretend the BBL didn't pass. It failed. And I will put 3 points forward what would happen if BBL failed. And then I'll show you the context, the global context of what exactly is happening around the rest of the world. I'll talk about ISIS, and I'll talk about the internet, and I'll talk about the youth. The first is, if it fails, you've heard Samira talk about a process. It's a 17-year process. This time it would be the Philippine government who would default essentially on an agreement that was set in place. Once that happens, the MILF leaders, the moderates, because remember, from 1991 to about 2005, the Southern Philippines was host to a group that was called Jemaah Islamiyah. It was discovered after 2001, and it was Singapore that first put out a white paper in December of 2001 pointing out what that is. But from 1991 to about 2005, and it was actually November of 2005, we were safe haven for JI and for other groups. Some groups I followed from Pakistan, Harkatul Ansar, which became Harkatul Mujahideen, which became Harkat. Well, you get it. They change names, but they come in. The MILF kicked out the Abu Sayyaf, the more radical extremists, when the moderates took power. What happens now when their peace process fails? What will happen is the moderates will be pushed out of power. There'll be roughly 12,000. Again, the number of armed men is up for grabs, depending on who you talk to. But there will be armed men who will no longer be handled. We also know this is a fact, right? That the local governments in those areas, no disrespect to any local government, but in some areas the MILF has more credibility with the people than some of the local government units. We know there are about 1,400 private armed groups. Again, no disrespect to anyone, this is just a fact. What happens when the moderates get pushed aside? The radicals will have greater power because the path failed. And it doesn't matter why or how it failed, it just failed, and I think that would be the next part of it. Let's look then at what happens with the context now, and I'll put it in the context of what's happening in Syria. In Syria right now, you basically have a group that is the fourth evolution, the fourth wave of what I was calling in my last book that was published in 2011, we called it a jihadi virus with an I, meaning it's not jihad that is wrong, but the jihadi, the political goal of power. So this jihadi virus is the fourth permutation. They've gone beyond just recruiting to hit a Western power or to hit their own governments. They've actually seized land. So let's just go look at the Philippines. The internet and social media, it's changed. Next slide. I'll go through these fast because I want to give it back to the people who you want to hear from. Khalil Pareha, can you go back, please? Khalil Pareha, at that up front, is a Filipino, the first Filipino who posted on YouTube a call for jihad in the southern Philippines in 2011, and he was arrested in 2012. When he was arrested, he had a ticket to Yemen and was in touch on Facebook with terrorists from Al-Shabaab in Somalia and AQAP in Yemen. He was the head of one of the extremist groups that were kicked out by the MILF. Next. This is what it looks like now on YouTube. And this is actually a network diagram in Syria. We can do network diagrams like this as well in Southeast Asia. But the point of a network diagram is it emanates from a person. And normally if it's person-to-person recruitment, you can control it to a degree, but when it goes on social media, it's viral. It can be viral and it is harder to trace. I've spent much of this year traveling from Milan. This sounds really glamorous places, but they were all talking about countering violent extremism, from Milan to Bonn to the United States, which finally held a CVE summit for 65 countries around the world. The Philippines was one of the countries there. And the whole idea is, how do you protect the youth from things like this? Indonesia is probably the first in our region, but Australia is actually leading the push towards Syria. Next slide.
here's what ISIS is doing on social media now, right? They're fluent. They're more fluent than we are on Rappler. They're fluent in YouTube, Instagram, Tumblr. They had a high of nearly 40,000 tweets in a day as they marched into the northern Iraqi city of Mosul. That's more than a year ago. The hype, they created hype with a total of 700,000 accounts discussing ISIS. That's now down to about 90,000 Twitter accounts, and then Twitter has pounded it. It's about 42,000. But you have 46,000 pro-ISIS Twitter accounts from this time period, from October to November 2014. And here's the one, until today, 200,000 pieces of social media content in a day. And here's what I heard from young Muslim men and women, as well as Christian men and women who were recruited by these ISIS accounts. They're like man-to-man defense. They talk to them at 2 in the morning when they're feeling lonely or when they're feeling just bad because they don't have jobs. They use hashtags for group messaging, and they have even better production value, especially in their beheading clips, right? If you've seen it. Next slide. Next slide. This is how they convert. This is the social conversion funnel. So you can go, they start with open and searchable. They use this to access everyone, you know, on social media. You're talking about 40% of the world who is on the internet. Anonymous, then they go down to a social media account like Ask FM. That's anonymous mediated communication. Then as they go further to recruitment, they go to things like Skype or Kik. These are encrypted direct messages when they're talking to them. And I've heard so many young Canadians, young Australians talking about, in fact, one Australian, the third the person that's followed by the foreign fighters in Syria was in Cebu for several months. His name was Musa Ser Antonio. He's a Melbourne-born Australian. Not a Muslim, he was a convert to Islam. He was Christian. He found meaning in this, in terrorism, right? In spreading the virulent ideology. And then finally, they go to physical contact. Next slide. Here are the forces for radicalization. They're not mine. They're actually what the countering violent extremist organizations are saying, but you can look at it. Social media is very personal. And so our youth are actually more, I believe, more prone. They have personal factors, there are the group factors, you have the community factors, socio-political factors, and then the ideology. Our problem in the Philippines, unlike Indonesia, which is driven by ideology, our problem is not ideology as much. Doesn't mean it isn't there, because it is still. Then finally, it goes to mobilization and active support. Let's go to the, I'm gonna quickly go through the rest of this. If you click this, look at this guy. He is Canadian, Christian, converted, and is now one of the 20,000 foreign fighters who are in Syria. Although at the end of this video clip, he kills himself, right? I know I won't show you the whole thing, but can you look at the production value, right? So part of this is, of those 20,000, that's a huge number, because in a decade of fighting in Afghanistan, you only had less than 10,000 foreign fighters going in. In 3 years in Syria, you have 20,000. So let's go to the next one. This is it, social media. And we are all on social media. Does anyone here not have a Facebook account? Chief Justice has a, he may not have a Facebook account. My parents have a Facebook account. So social media, just the tipping point. The tipping.
There are 5 Facebook accounts in his name.
5 Facebook accounts.
All
Fake ones.
From Congressman Lobregat. So I want to just quickly show you why social media, because social media, and why it's more volatile, because it actually plays with your emotions. It's mildly addictive, and it causes an adrenaline drive, right? So you notice when you're on Facebook, it's hard to get off. You have higher levels of dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter. You're mildly addicted. You have higher levels of oxytocin, which is a love hormone, the sex hormone. That's what it's called. Okay, next slide. In July of 2009, just look at the middle slide. July 2009 was a tipping point for social media. Why? Because it overtook pornography as the #1 activity on the web. From the beginning of the internet until July 2009, pornography was the #1 activity of the web, and it led innovation. July 2009, social media took over. Now you understand why ISIS is so good at it, because their techniques are incredible. Next slide. Let's go to the next slide. This is the way we look at it. I look at this for Rappler. I look at this for countering violent extremism. Let's click it. It's the way it travels. The tweet or the post carries an emotion. It travels over social networks, and that changes behavior. When it travels over social networks, the physical social networks are family and friends. But when you put it on social media, you take away the boundaries of time and space. So social media is just your physical social network on steroids. Imagine when terrorists can get a handle of it. Next. Let's keep going, because I want to give it back to you. I have less. This is the last thing I want to show you. As radicalization increases, family influence decreases. And this is what they've seen in every country around the world. And it is such a huge problem now that 65 countries, including ours, has actually said that we must do something about countering violent extremism. You can see again the faces of radicalization next to family influence. What does this have to do with BBL? That's the context of the debate we're having in the Philippines. And I think regardless of what path our country, our legislators choose, it's a context that must always be there, because as of now, ISIS in Syria, the US analysts are now actually starting to talk about possible failure. What if ISIS wins? It's been a year since the US has been there, and the people who are in Syria, they won't say their names, but they actually say that the government is as corrupt as ISIS, but ISIS actually gives them a better, while it's violent, it's transparent, and they actually do what they say. So it's a different world. It's a different world. That is the context for our debate in the Philippines. Thanks.
We're now going to open the discussion and invite questions. We have, I think, 20 minutes. Can you please, anyone who wants to start, you can address, please say specifically whom you want to answer the question, and maybe your name and where you're from. If no one's ready yet, can I ask Attorney Bacani, you've been working in the Senate, you've been giving seminars to our senators. Can you give us the mood there, and when the alternative bill to BBL will be filed, and what do you think it will be?
We are conducting 7 roundtable discussions in the Senate, and we partnered with a think tank of the Senate. It's called the Senate Economic Planning Office. Now, I just would like to clarify that these roundtable discussions are academic, non-partisan discussions. And I always say at the very start, and it is attended mostly by technical people of Congress, of the Senate, legal consultants of senators, and the committee that's now looking at it. So they're at present drafting the substitute bill. But what we are we are working on our understanding frameworks, okay, and history and context. So we are not into telling people, these are alternative, etc., or your language is or language that. Although there are some requests to do it, right? But the thing is, and this is, I go back to my original, to my argument. Number one, there's a need to really understand the context, the history, the nuances of the issue of autonomy in southern Philippines. And so when we actually, when we actually capsulize everything by the word BBL, and now it's changed even, right? And now I was always asking, later I'll ask Samira will you go to the bar tomorrow? And she's Muslim woman, who's not, and the liquor is against, So I don't know whether that has come into the whole debate of the bar. No? So if I ask her to go to the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. So that is ongoing at the moment. So if you ask me what is the status of that, okay, this is not. I cannot say officially because the things that we are doing there are not, for the purpose. It's not a lobbying activity. It's just deepening the discourse, deepening understanding of the issues around the BBL. But what I know is that the writing of the substitute bill is ongoing at the moment. So that's what I heard. Okay.
I think since Reggie, you asked a question earlier. Do you want to ask it again? And from whom? You said that what would happen if the BBL isn't passed? And Maria gave this global context. So would you like to ask any of our speakers? Who in particular? The two, okay. So Congressman Lobregat and Chief Justice Davide.
Again. Yeah. What will be the repercussion if it doesn't happen towards the end of the Aquino administration? Because there is a condition that it should be the one of the legacy of President Aquino, and of course, it will be a reset if there will be a new administration that will tackle this. And if ever, what will be the other possible alternatives? So, yun po.
Okay, I'll start with the other possible alternative. If the BBL does not pass, then the present arm will still exist. Now, you can improve the present arm. In fact, that is one of the difficulties of this bill, because you are abolishing something that has been worked on by another group, which was the official representative of the Bangsamoro, which is the MNLF. So instead of abolishing the arm, you can strengthen it. Now, very clear, Mujib Hataman sat down as governor for such a very short time. But he has achieved so much in that very short span of time. So I do not agree when they say the arm is a failure. You know, the Constitution is only as good as the people that implement it. Any law is as good as how it is implemented. So for me, there is still hope. There will always be hope to improve the arm. You know, for us in Zamboanga, we want the autonomous region to succeed. If the autonomous region succeeds, then there is peace, there is progress, not only for the arm, but for Zamboanga and the rest of Mindanao. But we've always said, let us respect each other. We have been asked twice whether we want to join the autonomous region, and we have overwhelmingly said, no, we don't want to join the autonomous region. So, let it be. But like I said, in a recent study, it showed that, religion is not the cause of the conflict. In fact, the cause of the conflict is more of clan, of Rido, and all that. So, you ask me if the BBL does not pass, then there is still hope, because we can improve and strengthen the autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao.
Now my turn. If it will not be passed, then the autonomous region will remain to be under Republic Act 6734 as amended or improved later on by Republic Act 9054. But as I said in my introduction, it is not just a matter of having that law. The time right now is to have one better one, guaranteeing actual autonomy to the Bangsamoro. It is just like building a new house. It is much better than merely repairing an old one. A dilapidated law, for instance, should not stay any longer. a new one must come out. And I think this is the best law. Now, what will happen afterwards? Back to square one. And that is very, very unfortunate. It would be sad commentary on our social, political, historical order. So I hope that a clearer understanding will be achieved on the basic law for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. I am for it as subject to the observations I made earlier. I am for it because I was a member of the Constitutional Commission of 1986, and we worked so hard to achieve this goal of autonomy in Muslim Mindanao.
Thank you. Would any of the panelists want to respond to that question? Okay. Benny Bacani.
We have to understand that if BBL is not passed in this administration, that doesn't necessarily mean that the peace process ends. Okay, and so the centerpiece of this peace process is the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro. Okay, that provides the substance and the roadmap. In fact, there are many things in the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro that need not be legislated, the normalization processes, etc. So I think it's important. The BBL is a process, it's a democratic process of writing the law. Whether you agree to that, to positions of people there, it's how we do our laws. Okay, and the MILF will have to contend with the Philippine political system. So a decision will have to be made by them, how they will react if it doesn't pass in this administration. Because you also hear that if it is passed, but it is totally watered down, what's the point of passing it? Okay, so these are all, it's not an easy or it's not as simple as we pass it or not pass it. It's also the question of the quality of the law. And in fact, for us who has been working with the issues of autonomy, it's never about the basic organic law. It's even about processes in government. The whole issue of relationship between LGUs, autonomous regions, is totally dysfunctional, and this will not be even remedied by the BBL, because the BBL actually fixes the legal relations between the national and the regional. So there are just so many things that will have to be done still. And therefore, I wouldn't want to equate BBL immediately as the failure of the peace process. In fact, you can have, right now, there's already been a symbolic decommissioning. That's something already. But to say that we need to have exit agreement by the end of, otherwise everything, that's not recognizing really the dynamics of peace processes, the dynamics also political reforms and development.
Marlon Manuel would like to answer that.
Just to add the legislative process aspect to the passage, the move to have it passed within the current administration is not only because it is intended to be a legacy of the current administration, but also because if we don't pass it by the end of the current term of our legislative body, we have to go back to step one. That means repeating the entire legislative process. That is the reality. So while we don't want to rush things, and we want to be very thorough in our analysis, not beating the deadline, and that means the end of the term of the current of our Congress now, will mean it has to be refiled, and it has to go through the first reading and then to the committee again. We don't know if there will be another ad hoc committee for the House. It has to go through the same committee discussions, and then we might end up with the same situation now, that we will be rushing towards the deadline, towards the end of the next Congress. And we have seen this happen in the past. The land use bill had been filed in the 9th Congress and had to be refiled every time. We are now in the 16th, and still we don't have a land use law. The same with the Freedom of Information Bill. It had suffered the same fate of repeating the process every time there is a failure in the previous term. Then you have to go through the same process again.
Thank you. May we ask Raisa or Kay from our social media team if there are comments or questions, since we're being viewed from different parts of the world, I assume, or outside Manila.
Right now, we don't have questions from the social media, but we have comments regarding what will happen if PPL is not passed. Somebody, Nash Theismans at Nash Theismans on Twitter said that support for the PPL is needed, but if it doesn't pass, it's unfair to think people in Mindanao will just revert to status quo. Another comment is, we are waging a costly war while neglecting income that could have been generated by peaceful Mindanao. This is a comment by East School of Philosophy on Twitter. And another comment is, last comment, from Jen Fab. He said that BPL is designed to rectify the conflict in Mindanao and to give hope to children.
Thank you. We have time for one or two simple questions. One, please, and then sister, and then I'll just collect first both of your questions. Yes. Maybe you can come closer to the mic.
Good afternoon. My name is Lugan Alipio, and I am a judicial reform and independence advocate. So I'm not sure if my simplest question, but I am just wondering, because I attended the Integrated Bar of the Philippines forum on the same issue, and I'm asking this question to former Chief Justice Davide and also Congressman Lobregat. Justice Vicente V. Mendoza, I think his contention was there was an executive order from the president that we might ask the people, maybe through a plebiscite. I think that's Congress's power for constituent power. That's power, sorry, they call it constituent power. So I'm just wondering, why was not, if we get our voices to be heard, but instead of just asking the people, are we passing Bangsamoro, yes or no, the Congress can just put it by line item, like the contentious issue, and let the people decide. Thank you.
This is not a question, this is a sharing. I'd just like to share, because last June 28, we brought to Mama Sapano some of the relatives of SAF 44. When they went there was fear, there was anger. Now when they start interacting with the people of Mama Sapano, it completely changed. They were very sympathetic, they were very happy, and they felt welcome. And in fact, they said, we will help to pass the BBL so that there will be peace. It was really a healing process.
Thank you for that sharing. Now who will answer it first? This Chief Justice Davide, it's a very legal question.
Unfortunately, I was unable to attend that forum, the IBP. But I understand that the IBP had published a journal now with several position papers included, including that of Justice Mendoza, that of Justice Feliciano, and also that of Marham Salik, Nasser Marham Salik. But an executive order was mentioned by the one asking the question. I'm not really very familiar with that executive order. Anyway, the best source of any authority in respect to the implementation of the constitutional mandate on the creation of autonomous regions in Muslim Mindanao and the Cordillera would really be Congress itself. So you have a specific provision that it is a constitutional duty of Congress to so provide for the Organic Act. But it's a matter of knowing the urgency of the situation. the Constitution also provides that the first Congress convened after the ratification of the new Constitution must act on it immediately, merely to show the urgency and the necessity of the matter of creating formally the autonomous region. And the autonomous region created under this bill now, the Bangsamoro basic law for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, is not creating another another autonomous region. It is merely to supplant, to replace what had been created under Republic Act 6734 as modified or implemented later or improved later by Republic Act 1954.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, Father Bernas, in one of his columns, said that the problems with the BBL on the constitutionality are plenty, madami. So he suggested that possibly one way to tackle the constitutionality is to put it as a question, as a constitutional issue, and let the people decide. Now, unfortunately, in the Constitutional Commission, there was this discussion on who should participate in the plebiscite. And the decision was that those directly affected. And it should not be the whole country, because if you have the whole country, then you might never have an autonomous region. That's the issue. Now, anyway, to me, because you're asking about the passage of the law, when it will be passed. To me, it is not important. What is not important to me is not the passage of the law or when it will be passed, but what kind of law will we pass. Will it be able to stand legal scrutiny? You have Justice David saying it is constitutional. You have Justice Mendoza saying that it is not constitutional. You see? You have the Philconsa, who has now filed a case on the FAB and the CAP. Because really, there are so many provisions in the CAB and the FAB that more or less can be questioned. And the CAB and the FAB are more advanced than the MOA AD. The MOA AD was only an implementing guideline. There was the Agreement of Peace of 2001. After that, there was the implementing guidelines on security, which was passed, the implementing guidelines on development and rehabilitation, which was passed, and the last one was the implementing guidelines on the MOA AD. Here, you have a more advanced form already. You have finished all the implementing guidelines, the 4 annexes. You now have a comprehensive agreement, which did not happen in the case of the MOA AD. You even have a proposed law. There, the law was supposed to come so many months after. But the Supreme Court already took notice, cognizance of the MOA AD. So that is why, I think that is why they filed now a case on the CAP and the FAB.
Okay, on that note, quite pessimistic. Okay. We will end the open forum, and I'm getting confused about the bar, the cab, and the fab. So we need a session with Benny Bacani. Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you, Chief Justice Davide, Congressman Lobregat, Benny Bacani, Samira Gutok, Marlon Manuel. Thank you very much, and we're back to our MC.
I'm just a transitory MC. Thank you, Ms. Marites Bitug, and for the panel members, thank you very much. I'd like to call on our managing editor again, Glenn De Gloria, to give us a little wrap-up to end this Rappler evening.
Well, I will try. I think, well, thank you, everyone. I think the first highlight of this session is one consensus that lawyers complicate our lives. Yes? Seriously speaking, I think there's one that we all are for peace, but peace with justice and peace that works. Two, that according to Chief Justice Davide, not Justice Mendoza, the original draft of the Bangsamoro Basic Law is largely constitutional, and that they are glad, the council members are happy to know that 80% of the revisions that they've proposed are now embedded in the new draft law, which we look forward to. There is also a consensus that as a nation and as stakeholders here, we must look at the agreement and the proposed law as a consensus of policymakers, of Congress, of the executive, and the civil society, and not as a concession or a gift to the Moro people, and that this is a process and not a shotgun marriage or a one-shot deal. But there are three realities that we have to contend with. One is that the status quo cannot be status quo, because as Samira has said, devolution is not working in Mindanao, and Mindanao deserves better than what it is experiencing now. Number two is that the global context of terrorism, and that without a framework or without a specific path for peace, the lure of terrorism will always be there. And third, but hopefully, yes, the last is that the reality is that if the law is not passed now, we're back to square one in 2016. On that note, I don't want to end on a pessimistic note, though. We look forward to a peaceful Mindanao. Thank you so much again.
Thank you very much. This ends our forum. I'd like to invite everyone to snacks and food. For those of you who also need to break fast, please join us outside for coffee and some snacks. Thank you very much. This will also be replayed on Rappler.com, so please wait. It'll probably come out tonight. Please share this with your friends. Have a good day, everybody.